Welcome to Mickey Study Circle channel. In this video, we shall understand the orthographic projection of solids by certain visualization techniques. Coming to the problem statement, a square prism, 35 sides of base and 65 axis length, rests on HP on one of its edges of the base, which is inclined to VP at 45 degrees. Draw the projections of the prism when the axis of the prism is inclined to HP at 30 degrees. So, looking at the problem statement, we can arrive at a few conclusions. So, the type of the prism that is mentioned here is a square prism, and each of its side is going to measure 35 and since it is a prism, it is also going to have a height, and that height of the axis is 65 And also, the resting condition is it is resting on one of its edges of the base, and this edge of the base is inclined to VP at an angle of 45 degrees. Before that, the axis of the prism is inclined to HP at 30 degrees. So we are going to draw the three conditions, that is, in the initial position, it is resting on one of its edges, and then the axis of the prism is inclined to HP at 30 degrees, and also the edge of the base on which it is resting initially is inclined to VP at an angle of 45 degrees. So we'll create a simple 3D model and we'll try to understand the pictorial representation of the orthographic projection of solids. We will now try to understand the pictorial representation of the orthographic projection of the solids. And here, the type of the prism is a square prism. And as per the problem statement, it is having a side measuring 35 and the axis length is 65 So as you can see this is a square prism, so which is having a side of 35 and axis of 65 And now we will consider the two planes for the better understanding. So this plane is the vertical plane where the front view is recorded, and this plane is the top view where the this is the horizontal plane where the top view is recorded. So now, as per the initial condition, so he tells that it is resting on the horizontal plane on one of its edges. So now we will try to place this square prism in such a way that it is resting on one of its edges on the horizontal plane. So as per the condition, we need to have one of its edges which is parallel to the horizontal plane, and it is perpendicular to the vertical plane. So we will see how to do that. So we will select this face of the square prism and also the horizontal plane, and we will consider this edge and the horizontal plane. So you can just see that the square prism is placed on the horizontal plane on one of this edges. So this is the initial position. So you can just see that this is the front view of the square prism. So you can just see that this is the square prism front view, which is having the total axis length of 65 and then the the top view of the square prism, which is having a front view of the square prism, which is having the top face shown, that is 35 Okay, so now this is how the object is going to look. So now in the second condition, he tells that the plane, that is the axis of this particular square prism, is inclined to the horizontal plane. So this is the horizontal plane. Okay, so it is inclined to the horizontal plane at an angle of 30 degrees. So for that, we will see how to do this. So this particular phase, as you can see, that it has to be inclined to the horizontal plane at an angle of 30 degrees. So we will select this. The angle of inclination is 30 degrees. So this is the first condition. And then we will try to rest the edge on the horizontal plane. and also try to align this particular face of the square prism with the vertical plane. So now we'll have a view of the square prism which is having its one of the axis inclined to the horizontal plane at an angle of 30 degrees, correct? So now this is the second position. So this is the front view of the second position, and next this is the top view of the second position. So you can just see that this is the top view. So when this particular square prism was inclined in such a way that the axis was inclined to the horizontal plane at an angle of 30 degrees, this face of the square prism is seen and this face of the square prism is seen. So in order to visualize the hidden edges, so this is how you can understand the concept of the hidden lines. So this bottom portion of the square prism will be a hidden line and all the other will be the thick lines. So now we'll go to the next position, that is after the square prism was inclined with one of its axis at an angle of 30 degrees to the HP, and now the resting edge, that means what? This edge on which it is resting is inclined to the vertical plane at an angle of 45 degrees. So now we will see how to visualize this condition. So we will take this square prism. So this is the resting edge, as you can see, and that resting edge must be inclined to this 45-degree line. So this is how it is. So the edge on which it is resting is now inclined to the vertical plane at an angle of 45 degrees. So this is the visualization. So this is the first condition. So this is the complete front view of the square prism. So it is inclined at an angle of 30 degrees. The axis is inclined at an angle of 30 degrees to the horizontal plane, and then the resting edge is inclined to the vertical plane at an angle of 45 degrees. So this is the front view, and this is the top view of the square prism. So we can just move this. Okay. So this is the top view of the square prism. So in order to visualize the hidden edges, so you can just see the hidden edges. So this is how it is. So this is the 2D representation that we are going to draw using the Solid Edge software. So this is the visualization. So a square prism is initially resting on one of its edges on HP. So this is the front view and this is the top view of the first condition. With the next condition, he tells that the square prism is also inclined to the HP in such a way that its axis is inclined to HP at an angle of 30 degrees. So the axis will also be parallel to this edge. So with that concept, we have ensured that this face of the prism is inclined to the HP at an angle of 30 degrees. So this is 30 degrees inclination. And now this is the front view of the second position, and this is the top view of the second position. So this is the top view of the second position with the hidden lines. And now we'll go for the third position. So for that, he tells that the edge on which it is resting is inclined to VP at an angle of 45 degrees. So you can just see that this line that I've taken for reference is inclined to the VP at an angle of 45 degrees. And on this line, I'm going to place the square prism. The resting edge of the square prism is now placed on this 45-degree line. So this is the front view, and this is the top view of the square prism when it is inclined to VP at an angle of 45 degrees. So this is the visual representation of the orthographic projection of solids, particularly